Greetings, I'm Demonac, and the new Ungoro expansion is coming to Hearthstone pretty soon. You can tell it's soon because they gave us a free Volcanosaur, and the cards are now all in the game, accessible through the set menu, and of course, turning on the crafting so you can see all the cards that you don't have yet, except for a Volcanosaur, which you probably do have if you've logged in since this morning. So I haven't gone through all of these cards. I have seen quite a number of them on Facebook. I'm just going to give my quick first impressions because it's already going to take forever. We'll probably do about half this video, about half next video. So starting with Druid, got Earthen Scales here. Whoa, computer, hello. So this is an interesting card. I don't know if it's a good card. But I mean, +1/+1 to a friendly minion for 1 mana is on its own crap. But then you get armor equal to its attack. So early game, you can use this. It is not a great use of a card, but it might be good for tempo to be able to spend 1 mana and make your minion win a fight with another minion. Either kill something big and dangerous that you wouldn't otherwise be able to, that you just need that little extra edge. Or if you could make your minion big enough to kill something and survive and gain 1 or 2 armor from it. Who cares about the armor? But, you know. The thing that makes it interesting is that later in the game, you can play this with a big minion. It's like a kicker in Magic the Gathering way back. Anyway, it's like spend 1 extra mana and a card, of course, but make that big minion slightly bigger, which is probably almost meaningless, and then gain armor equal to its attack. Which, if it was say an 8/8 taunt for 8, and then you spend 1 more mana, now it's a 9/9. And you gain 9 armor, suddenly that's kind of interesting for control. I don't know if it would actually make it into any kind of control decks, but it is kind of flexible in that way. I think you compare it a little bit to Power Word Shield. Power Word Shield draws you a card. Obviously, that's amazing in all circumstances. But this gives you the same amount of stats for the same cost. Instead of drawing you a card, it's gaining you an amount of armor which later in the game could be significant from a control point of view. Right away, right off the bat here, we have Jungle Giants. This is a quest. When you see a spell that has like this legendary card sort of icon on it, it's a quest card. It says quest in the description too. There's one of these for each class. I think only one for each class so far, although I'm sure there'll be another one for each class in every expansion forever. And the quests are a new card type that works kind of interestingly. If you have a quest in a deck, you can only have 1 copy. I mean, that's why they use the legendary logo. And you automatically draw the quest in your starting hand, is my understanding of how it works. So it's not that if you're so lucky as to draw this, then it's a good first turn play. It's like, no. I'm pretty sure that you're guaranteed to have this quest in your starting hand, if it's in your deck. So then you spend your 1 mana, presumably first turn. Okay. You put out your quest, and for the rest of the game, you have an objective to try and achieve. If you achieve the objective, you get the reward. And I think their interface is crap for not showing up here the actual cards that are summoned by other cards. It seems like a massive oversight in the way they've done their thing. So I'll probably be having to Google these as I go along. Because this one is summon 5 minions that have 5 or more attack. Now it does say summon, not play, so it doesn't have to be from hand. However they come out, if they have 5 or more attack, they should work. So that's a plus. But still, summoning 5 big minions, well, it's technically possible to do this fairly early in the game. Like you could technically do this by turn 5 or 6 without too much difficulty. Especially if you have like innervates and stuff, and your deck's tuned for it. But that is a lot of effort, and you're not reliably going to be doing that on turn 5. Hell no. So it gives you Barnabas the Stomper here, which is an 8/8 for 5. There are a lot of the quest reward minions cost 5. An 8/8 for 5, and his battle cry reduces the cost of all minions in your deck to 0. That's quite a power. So this quest takes up 1 of your cards in your starting hand and takes 1 mana, probably first turn. And then you have to play 5 or more minions that have 5 attack. I mean, you could be using actual big minions, or you could be trying to sort of cheat it with 5/2s and stuff. Then you spend the 5 mana, you get this 8/8, and for the rest of the game your minions are free. So if your deck is stacked with big expensive minions, that's amazing, but you still have to have other cards in your hand, or if you draw one minion and play one minion every turn, then by that point in the game it may not make as much difference. There are a lot of interplays, but whatever it is, that is a very cool thing if it goes off. That's Jungle Giants. We have the Tortolan Forager here. He's like add a 2/2 for 2. His battle cry adds a random minion with 5 or more attack to your hand. That is kick-ass. First off, in the arena, that's an insane card. But I think even in constructed, that's 2/2 for 2, gives you a card. It's not a card that you are likely to be able to play in the next 3 or 4 turns, but it could give you something awesome. And it basically can't give you something that is cheap or small. It could give you something that is bad with a drawback, but it can't give you anything cheap or, it can't give you anything small. So that is a hell of a strong common to start out with. Elder Longneck here. He's a 5/1 for 3. Once again, looks suspiciously like it helps with that quest. He's a 5/1 beast for 3, I should say. And if you're holding a minion with 5 or more attack in your hand, then he gets to adapt. Adapt is another new mechanic in the set, but adapt is basically discover a minion ability. So it's going to give you 3 choices just like it does for discover. But instead of choosing 3 cards from some specific pool, it's giving you a choice of 3 of these specific 10 minion abilities to choose from. So you might not get the one you want. There's still that much randomness, but you do have some control over it. Your choice ability, you could get +1/+1, poisonous, which is like poisonous in Magic. I forget what they call it now, but it's what the Cobra has, the Emperor Cobra. So if poisonous minion damages another minion, that minion is destroyed. Stealth for 1 turn, Divine Shield, super powerful. Wind Fury, super powerful. Taunt, in the right situation, Taunt, very good. There's also just +3 health, +3 attack, can't be targeted by spells or hero powers, and Death Rattle, summon 2 1/1 plants. Those are pretty good abilities, especially since you get to choose them. You don't get exactly the one you want, but it gives you any 3 of these to choose from. You are often going to get something very good from adapting. But, I mean, you'd have to factor that in, but there's still, how much does this card actually cost? So, this guy, as a 5/1 for 3, assuming that you trigger his battle cry, assuming you have a minion with 5 or more attack, then he might be a 5/4 beast for 3, which is excellent. It could be an 8/1, which is pretty scary if your opponent is not set up to deal with that. Or, he could, and that's just one of that. It could be a 6/2, 5/1 with Divine Shield, excellent. 5/1 with Stealth, excellent. 5/1 can't be targeted by spells or hero powers, might work out really well. So there are a lot of good options. Obviously, if you're not triggering his hero power, then he seems suspiciously like a certain Molten Core minion that nobody ever plays. But yeah, and let's see what we have. Speaking of adapt, Evolving Spores. 4 mana, just adapt all your minions. I don't know exactly how this works. I have a suspicion that it's going to just choose a random one. It may be that you get 1 adapt and it applies it equally to all your minions, which would be interesting. Or I'm guessing it might work more like the mech that upgrades people. Just lost the name from my brain. But anyway, I think it might just randomize it for each of your minions or something. But either way, this can give a bunch of power to your minions. But I don't know how good that is compared to what's his name. God damn it! Because you could, for 4 mana, there's a neutral minion who's a 3/2 that gives each of your other minions either Divine Shield, Wind Fury, or Taunt. And that way you also get a 3/2 out of it. So is Evolving Spores the ultimate? I don't think. I think a lot of people are going to be down on it. I don't know if it's actually that good, but it's interesting. Shell Shifter is a 3/3 for 4, but he's not actually, because you choose when he comes into play, should he be a 5/3 Stealth or a 3/5 Taunt, which is pretty good and flexible. And of course, if you have what's his legend, the Druid legendary guy, that lets you get both choices, then he's a 5/5 stealth taunt. Hooray! So, that, again, a 3/5 taunt for 4 is a perfectly good minion. 5/3 stealth for 4 is a good minion. Having a choice, very good minion. Seems pretty straightforward. Does that mean he makes the cut in decks? I have no idea. I'm not an expert on the meta, really. Sorry. Living Mana is a weird-ass card. So this is 5 mana. Transform all of your mana crystals into 2/2 minions. Recover the mana when they die. I assume if you have more than 7 mana, like if you have too many mana crystals and they won't fit in your board space, I'm assuming they stay as mana. I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure. I think they just become like 2/2 minions with Death Rattle, gain 1 mana. As I have heard suggested that you might silence them and that would be badness. But 5 mana for 5 2/2s? That is a lot of power on the board. Is it actually a good idea? Yeah, I don't know. Does it trigger from that Addled Grizzly or whatever and get +1/+1 on all of them? I don't know, but it'd be interesting. Verdant Longneck is a much bigger adapt minion. It's a 5/4 for 5, which would be terrible, even as a beast. But of course, it's 5/4 for 5 with adapt. So he could be a 6/5 for 5, or he could be a 5/4 Divine Shields, 5/4 Wind Fury, etc. So I don't know if he's good. I'd say he's not as solid as like the Spell Shifter. It's not as interesting as the Long Neck. He's just there. Then there's Giant Anaconda, which is a 5/3 for 7. Blech. But Death Rattle, summon a minion from your hand with 5 or more attacks. So that works out really oddly, because you pay way too much for this 5/3 beast. And then when it dies, if you have a minion in your hand that has 5 attack or more, then you get to play it for free. Well, I don't think you have a choice. It immediately plays one of them for free if you had more than one that has 5 or more attack in your hand. That is super strange. Now, that is a Death Rattle that you could maybe copy. There is spoilers. There's a card later in the set, a legendary, that makes your Death Rattles go off as a battle cry, basically. So, if you had that guy out, then for 7 mana, you'd play this guy, you get a 5/3, and then you'd immediately summon a 5 attack creature from your hand if you have one. And you'd still have the Death Rattle, so that'd be sick. But on his own, he seems like the kind of thing that is probably not going to see a lot of use outside of the next heroic, like, solo adventure thing. I'm sure there'll be some solo adventure place where he might be useful, but in a real game, I don't think so much. Tyrantus is your Druid legendary. 12/12 beast for 10. Can't be targeted by spells or hero powers. I don't know how much play that's going to get, but that is a solid entry for 10 mana creatures. He is not just going to get assassinated. Like, it probably takes some actual effort to get rid of him. He's a pretty scary, kill you next turn sort of thing. Is that fantastic? I don't know, but he's there. So in Hunter, you have the Jeweled Macaw, which is replacing the spider. So instead of Death Rattle, get a random beast, you have a 1/1 beast for 1 is Battle Cry, add a random beast to your hand. Which I like better, but I mean, Death Rattle interacts with more things. So, obviously it's pretty similar. But anyway, that's not too exciting. It'll get played lots, I'm sure, but it's not too exciting. We have the Raptor Hatchling, which is a 2/1 for 1. Beast again, there are a lot of beasts in this expansion. 2/1 beast for 1. His Death Rattle shuffles a 4/3 Raptor into your deck. That's a 4/3 Raptor with a casting cost of 1. So, this is not putting another creature into play. In fact, you're putting another thing that is not all that huge into your deck, which you're going to draw instead of another card. So, it's actually kind of questionable. It's interesting. Like, I can see why they printed it, because that's damned interesting. It'd be interesting to see how that works out. But I don't think, even though it only costs 1, unless you have like a ton of card draw, I don't see that shuffling this 4/3 into your deck is going to be a very good thing. Because certainly, by turn 5 or 6, you don't want to draw this guy. You're like, oh yeah, I got a 1-drop. Play him, and then he dies, and then you get another 1-drop in your deck, which by the time you get it will seem kind of small compared to what would like to be drawing. So I feel like this is maybe like a booby trap that is not actually going to help you that much. Maybe there's some interaction I don't know about. I don't know. Stampede, each time you play a beast this turn, add a random beast to your hand. So it's just it's like lock and load for beasts, which is pretty beastly. That's craziness. So we will see lots of combos with that. I don't have any genius ideas, but it doesn't take a lot of genius ideas to make this functional. I mean, if you were going to play 2 beasts in a turn, if you can pay 1 mana to play this and still afford 2 beasts, then you're getting an arcane intellect for 1 mana. So it's pretty solid. Here's the Hunter quest, the Marsh Queen. Play 7 1-cost minions. So there is synergy with this thing, because those are 1-cost 4/3s, but man, you got to have some other things going on to make it worth putting that 4/3 in your deck. But you have the Marsh Queen. If you play 7 1-cost minions, you get Queen Carnassa. An 8/8 for 5. Again, you're going to see a lot of that for the quest rewards. A beast for 5. Her battle cry shuffles 15 raptors into your deck. And these aren't your ordinary raptors, okay? So I say that putting a 4/3 raptor for 1 in your deck isn't that great. Why would you want to shuffle 15 more stupid raptors into your deck after you've already played 7 1-cost minions and you're like, oh, these raptors are 3/2 for 1. Battle cry, draw a card. So yeah, when the raptor explosion happens, it's a raptor explosion. That suddenly becomes craziness. There's a reasonable chance every turn that you're just going to go and play like 4 or 5 raptors before you draw something, before you like run out of cards. Or just 3. It's like, oh, I only got 2 3/2 raptors for 1 this turn, and I still have the rest of my mana to do stuff with, because they replaced themselves with cards. So that's a crazy power when it goes off, obviously. Play 7 1-cost minions, you're still going to want some kind of support there, because you still have the problem that your entire deck is full of 1-cost minions to do that. But, I mean, they are 1-cost minions, so they're cheap to do. It is play, so summoning them from other effects isn't going to work. They have to be played, like, as cards from your hand. But anyway, so that's their quest. The Crackling Razor Maw here is a 3/2 for 2. 3/2 beast for 2. Very solid. And his battle cry is Adapt a Friendly Beast. I'm assuming that it can't target itself. Because if it could target itself, then this thing is Super Saiyan. Like, at that point, this thing is one of the best 2-drops in the game. Like, best aggressive 2-drops in the game. Like, insane. But even if it's not, this, first off, it supports the Marsh Queen quest very well. Because you have a whole bunch of crappy 1-drops. Being able to get out a 1-drop and then cheaply adapt it, giving it +1/+1, or +3 attack, or +3 hit points, or one of those other abilities, is very useful. You should always have a target for this. But this is strong in any deck, because, like, if you put one of those abilities on a big minion, it's amazing. It's like, just adapt is worth 2 or 3 stat points, right? Even, like, the ones that are stats are giving you 2 or 3 stat points. So just figure this is a 3/2 for 2 that says, with Battle Cry, get 2 or 3 more points worth of stuff if you have another friendly beast in play. Amazingness. So that's going to be all over the place. Dinomancy. For 2 mana, your hero power becomes Gift of Beast +2/+2. You're one of those hunters that, like, you're tired of shooting things. You really want it to be the pet hunter. Now you can be, because that is a crazy-ass hero power. That is, like, nuts. Now, that only works if you have beasts out, right? I mean, if you don't have a beast in play, it's not very good. And you have to build your deck knowing that a lot of the time you won't have this ability until you actually draw the card. You could go halfway through a game. You could go all the way through a game without getting it, so you can't count on it. Although +2/+2 to a minion is an insane hero power if you get that working consistently. So I'm sure we're going to see craziness with that. But remember also that when you put that out, you're losing your ability to finish the game by doing 2 damage to your opponent for 2 or 3 turns. Like, you have to have minions out there to do stuff. Grievous Bite is kind of oddly named because Bite does huge damage, and Grievous Bite is just like the Druid Bite, but for tiny damage. 2 damage to one minion, and 1 damage to the adjacent ones. Actually, it's not even bite. It's really just a really tiny explosive shot. Nevertheless, I mean, 2 mana for 2 damage is kind of baseline-y, kind of standard. The 1 damage to adjacent ones, there's nothing wrong with this card. It's a solid arena card, and if you have spell damage, it becomes pretty cool. It does not take a lot of spell damage to turn this thing into a pretty cool card. But it's not very exciting, put it that way. Terrascale Stalker is a 3/3 for 3, usually not good. Battle Cry, trigger a friendly minion's death rattle. There are definitely going to be combos with that. He's a very interesting card to have around. I mean, you can always see there's some crazy death rattles that you could get. Remember the snake? Yeah, this guy. Trigger his death rattle, just summon a free minion. I mean, they're different classes, so it's not going to happen. But there are lots of crazy death rattles out there. And Hunter has a good amount of them. Now, if you're just using this on a regular Hunter sort of death rattle, he's going to come out fine. Like, if you meet his condition, you will get enough stats to make it worthwhile. If that death rattle gives you a free 2/1 minion or 2 free 1/1s or something, he's gonna work out okay. But it is for a guy who's got a condition where he does nothing useful. He's just a crappy 3/3 for 3 unless you have a friendly death rattle minion out there. But there are a number of them that are worth like drawing a card, right? If you just have a loot hoarder and then you play this guy, you just get a card. Okay, that's pretty good, because these things that trigger a death rattle don't actually remove the death rattle, so you would still get the cards there. So I'm sure he'll see lots of play. I don't know if he's the ultimate. Tol'vir Warden is a 3/5 for 5. Battle Cry, draw 2 1-cost minions from your deck. So he's kind of overpriced, but he's helping to support your quest. Now, he's a little weird. Because let's figure it out. If he cost 1 less mana, he would be good. I don't think anyone's arguing that. If he was 4 mana, he'd be good. I'm hoping what happens is that they play tested this a lot, and they were like, whoa, at 4 mana, this guy is too good. So they had to bump it up to 5. But his stats are pretty weak for 5. If you draw 2 1-cost minions, so you could play those right away, but if you want to count those as part of the amount of stats you get for him, it only works if you actually count him as costing 7, so you're kind of like losing ground again. Like, he's interesting that way. Thinning your deck is really good, though. Your deck, you probably are playing with, if you're doing that quest, you're playing with a lot of 1-cost minions. And then after the quest goes off, this would draw 2 1-cost minions that draw a card when each of them is played. So after the quest goes off, then he's pretty powerful. I don't know. It works out really weird. And of course, there's the other, there's the 2/1 Raptor that seeds your deck with 4 1 for 3s. He could be pulling one of those maybe too. Really weird stuff. Swamp King Dread is the new dinosaur for Hunter. After your opponent plays a minion, attack it. So he's very aggro. He is a 9/9 for 7. And he gets first crack at everything that comes into play. So that is a really interesting, ability. He doesn't have charge, so you play him, he's not going to hit your opponent right away, and they do have plenty of chance to kill him. But if they don't immediately have a solution to him, he's going to eat everything they play. I don't know if he's all that strong, but I mean, he'd be a super amazing pick in the arena, I figure. But he is usually going to die, because it says, it's like, attack it. It doesn't say do his damage to it. He's still going to take damage from those, I'm pretty sure. Otherwise, it would make no sense and be ludicrous. Okay, so Mage, first thing is the Mage quest. Open the Waygate. So you have to cast 6 spells that didn't start in your deck. You're like, whoa, hold on. That is a pain in the ass. Mages have lots of cards that make new cards, like Babbling Book and the 5 mana thing that just gives you 3 cards, and there are more in this set. So there are lots of ways for a mage to cast a spell that, generates a spell that it wasn't in your deck. And dumb stuff like the minion of randomness there. Boy, I literally forget all the names when I go to do this. Amazing video! But yeah, like the stupid minion of Yogg-Saron or whatever it is, that 5/4 that like casts a spell on a random target to screw you when you play him. I'm pretty sure I think he would count for that because he's casting a spell, and it sure didn't start in your deck. So what do you get when you play all of these spells that weren't in your deck? Like, that's a pain in the rear. If spare parts were still in, that'd be good. So maybe you could probably do this pretty easily in Wild if you're using spare parts for it. I don't know if that's the best way to do it, but it would help. But what you get for it is take an extra turn. So you only have 5 mana for that turn, but whatever else you do with that turn was free, and of course you get back that 5 mana. So that is a pretty crazy power. That is very strange how that's going to work out. But let's start seeing all the amazing cards they got to support that, because I don't know if that quest is weaker or stronger than the other ones. The ability is all, like, the reward is amazing, but it seems hard to do. And then you start looking at the cards they've got. Archaeologist, it's a 2/3 for 2. The battle cry, draw a secret from your deck. Okay, that doesn't help with the quest, but it is amazing. So unlike the scientist, with the death rattle, you don't get the secret in play for free. So that's too bad. And this isn't going to trigger the quest because it's a secret from your deck. But 2/3 for 3 that guarantees that you have a secret in your hand for next turn. And of course, also, it's pulling his secrets out of your deck faster. So, like the scientist, is going to help make sure you get that ice block if you're going for a control-y deck or whatever. Like, that's very efficient. So this minion is going to be seen all over the place. Like, decks that are definitely not secret decks are totally going to play this and have like 1 or 2 secrets in their deck because that's so amazing. Flame Geyser is 2 mana, deal 2 damage, and then add a 1/2 elemental to your hand. That's a 1/2 elemental that costs 1. You're like, why do you want a 1/2 elemental? Like, that's okay. It's not even really that good for the casting cost. You're like, why would you want one? It's a thing. There are a lot of things in this set that create 1/2 elementals, or particularly add them to your hand. And there are a lot of elemental cards, because elemental is now a creature type. So all those things that were obviously elementals, if you know World of Warcraft, but that had no creature type, like the Magma Rager, or the Ice Rager, or the other element, or like, Earth Elemental, those guys all have the elemental type now. This set has stuff that triggers off the elemental type, and a lot of the stuff that triggers off the elemental type is in the form of, if you played an elemental last turn, do X. Well, all these cards that give you a 1/2 elemental in your hand, that's a 1/2 for 1. It makes it very much easier to play an elemental the turn before to set you up for a big elemental, like Battlecry type play. So that is interesting, even though on its own this card seems kind of weird. Not as weird, Primordial Glyph, which I'm assuming is going to be all over the place. So it's 2 mana to discover a spell and reduces cost by 3. So not only does this help your quest if you're playing with the quest, who cares if you're playing the quest? This 2-cost card is letting you pull out a spell that you have some choice over. So it's giving you a little bit, like, it's random, but it's still kind of giving you more control over what you have for that situation. And because it reduces the cost of that spell by 2, it's basically free. So it's not literally free, it works very differently from free, but turn 2 you might play this and then not do anything, and then have an expensive spell cheaper than it would normally be, just sitting in your hand, lying in wait. But later in the game, you can also, like, you have 7 mana. You can Primordial Glyph to try and get your Flame Strike, and if you do, you spent 2 mana on this, but it costs 2 less, so you can still Flame Strike. So it lets you cast a spell on whatever turn you would normally cast it on curve, but possibly like dig out that spell, or it gives you a chance to dig out the spell and cast it on curve to do whatever you need to do. This thing's so flexible. This is just like an amazing spell. And it boosts that quest, so craziness. Your Mage Legendary comes early. It's an elemental, and it is pretty cool. So, Pyros, it's a 2/2 for 2. You're like, what? That's a legendary? It's 2/2 for 2 with Death Rattle that adds a 6/6 for 6 to your hand. That 6/6 for 6 has Death Rattle, add a 10/10 for 10 to your hand. So, I mean, it's giving you stuff to play on whatever turn it is. Like this, I really like having legendaries that are cheaper, that are still useful early in the game, right? And that's and this is that. Like a 2/2 for 2 is not very good for that stage, but you're not losing a card because when it dies, you're going to get back that 6/6. The 6/6 for 6 is actually, okay. I mean, you wouldn't put a 6/6 for 6 in your deck, but since you got it for free out of this guy, that's pretty good. And then if the game is going long, you get that 10/10. That is a lot of minion you get out of that. So he's very interesting. I think he's good. I don't know how much play he's going to see because he doesn't serve a specific purpose in most decks. Okay, next up we have the Shimmering Tempest, who is a 2/1 elemental for 2. And Death Rattle, add a random mage spell to your hand. So, I mean, I like that better than the book myself, although the book is a battle cry, so I guess, okay, here's what happens. Late game, Babbling Book is much better, because it's only costing 1 of your mana for a crap minion you don't care about, and it gives you the spell right away. So this guy is definitely less good than that. But early in the game, this is more, like a 2/1 is usually going to be more useful than a 1/1, against 6 out of 9 classes anyway. And it's also an elemental, so it can trigger your elemental synergies. And either way, you're still getting another random mage spell, so that's pretty good. Mana Bind, new secret for 3, obviously. When your opponent casts a spell, add a copy of that spell to your hand, and the copy costs 0. So it's like a weird-ass counterspell. Like, you think you're going to get counterspelled, and then, nope, not countered, but I'm going to cast it right back at you for free at a time of my choosing. So that's pretty damn strong, I think. I suspect that will work out well for mages. Molten Reflection, for 4 mana, choose a friendly minion and summon a copy of it. That is weird. Like, okay, the problem with this is that you have to have a good minion in play. So, if you have 10 mana, you could play a 6-cost minion and then reflect it right away. Okay. It is summon, not play, so you're not getting battle cries. You are getting death rattles. It just works out very weird. Like, I don't think this is actually going to be that common or popular a card. Because it's similar to those shapeshifters. Like the one at 4/1, it's like a 1/1 taunt for 4, but it copies the stats of a friendly minion. Well, this copies the abilities of a friendly minion. And I'm sure there'll be some uses for this, but they'll probably more be for small minions that have some crazy power, like a small legendary that does something nuts. But even then, like, this just... Because you are only copying, you have to have something that's good enough to be worth copying. That is a significant requirement. And also, I'm wondering if it's summoning a copy, I'm wondering if damage stays, because then it's really looking kind of sad. So I don't think that's actually as great a card. Steam Surger is a 5/4 elemental for 4. Battlecry, if you played an elemental last turn, it begins. Add a Flame Geyser to your hand. So, if you have that elemental synergy stuff, this guy is really helping it along. Because 5/4 for 4, perfectly good stats. If you played an elemental the turn before, including one of those 1/2 elementals like you get from Flame Geyser, then he gives you a Flame Geyser, a do 2 damage for 2 damage spell, which would also give you an elemental to trigger something else. Of course, the turn after you play him, you could also play an elemental that has a battle cry. So, there's that. And Meteor. The new Flame Lance, it's flamier, it's less lancy. It's deal 15 damage to a minion for 6. And 3 damage to adjacent minions. So that's interesting. Lava Lance is already 5 mana, destroy a minion under most circumstances, right? Flame Lance is mostly Mage Assassinate. There are situations when 8 damage won't kill a minion. There aren't a lot of situations where it's better than Assassinate, but okay. So this is 6 mana, assassinate a minion, and deal 3 damage to the adjacent ones. Now, especially in this set, you can end up with minions that have more than 15 hit points. There are a couple of ways it can happen. I'm sure it's still not common, but it's more common than it would have been before this set, that's for sure. But still, it's basically 6 mana for destroy a minion and do 3 damage to the adjacent ones. That seems pretty solid to me. So, I can get behind that. Meteor seems pretty good to me. Don't know how main deck it is. Paladin has just straightforward, like, adaptation. 1 mana, just adapt a friendly minion. So, I don't know if I like that so much. Like, for something that buffs a minion's got to be pretty good. This one's very cheap for about 2.5 stat points, right? You could be giving him +1/+1, or +3 attack, or +3 hit points. +3 attack or +3 hit points could be amazing under a lot of circumstances. If you would do this and you end up picking +1/+1, you got shafted. That was a weak-ass card you played. Now, the fact that you might be able to put a Divine Shield or a Wind Fury on something for 1 mana, that would be amazing under the right circumstances. Or Taunt when you need it. Or Untargetable when you need it. But, I don't know. That is, on its own, it feels kind of weak to me when it doesn't come with the stats. So far, the strongest adapt card by far is that 3/2 that adapts a friendly beast. That thing is nuts. But anyway, Lost in the Jungle, it's just 1 mana, summon 2 1/1 Silverhand recruits. So they have all your Silverhand synergy, if any. But you get 2 1/1s for 1 mana. I think it's pretty solid. Although, this is not a 1/1 minion in your deck. This is a spell. So, that Paladin thing that, like, pulls 1/1 minions into your hand or whatever, is not going to work on this. Small time recruits. So here's the Paladin quest. The last Kaleidoscore. Cast 6 spells on your minions. That's right. Your plan now is to cast spells on your minions. What? Your plan is to cast spells on your minions. And Galvadon is a 5/5 for 5 mana that adapts 5 times. You get 5 choices of things to add to him. Now, each one of those is worth about 2.5 stat points, right? So he is going to be probably a large, quite minion. Almost certainly he's going to be Divine Shield and or Untargetable. He's going to have Wind Fury and or Taunt if you want it. You got to get a lot of options, and he is going to come out rough. But that does seem pretty weak ass compared to the other quest rewards. Like, that's just a big minion, you know? That is so much less interesting and cool somehow than the other quest rewards that do crazy things and change how your deck is played. On the other hand, casting 6 spells on your minions is... They gotta be spells, not just like minions buffing each other. That is pretty... The problem is, you usually don't want to fill your deck with too many spells that buff minions, as opposed to just more minions that buff other minions. So I would normally consider, like, if I was making a deck where, okay, I'm going to cast a lot of spells on minions, 6 to 8 is probably a lot of spells that cast on minions. So you'd have to get almost, if you're playing with the amount I'm comfortable playing with, you'd have to get pretty much all of them to trigger this. So I'd say this is one of the weaker quests we've seen so far. Not weaker, Hydrologist is a 2/2 for 2, just discovers a Paladin secret. I'm assuming it has to be a Paladin secret, but whatever, dude. It's a 2/2 for 2 that just gives you a free secret in your hand. And you still have to pay 1 mana to play a Paladin secret, but who cares? That's a way to make Paladin secrets worth playing, is to just give them to you and not take a slot out of your deck. So that guy, and he's a Murloc, he's going to see a play all over the place. Primal Fin Champion, 1/2 for 2. Murloc, obviously. Return Death Rattle. He gives you back any spells that you cast on him into your hand. That does help a lot with this quest. So you start getting to a point where there's Walrus Dude, he's what, like a 1/2 or something, and then when he's a 1/2 for 1, and if he has, at the end of the turn that he comes into play, he gives you a card if his attack is 3 or more. Or no, he has Death Rattle. That's right. Death Rattle, draw a card if his attack is 3 or more when he dies. This guy's similarly useful. Like, they both have a lot of synergy. This guy costs 2, but he literally gives you back the spells that you put on him. So that is a pretty powerful way to help you get more out of your stuff. But it's going to take more than that. Light Fuse, stick it on. Stick it on. 3/4 Beast for 4. Battlecry, adapt your Silverhand recruits. Again, I don't know how if this is one adaptation that hits all of them the same, or if it randomizes it, but you're getting a 3/4 for 4, and if you have 2 or more recruits out there, you're getting a couple of attacks that could be very good. If those are 1/1s that were able to attack this turn, that might be really good, because if any of them gets +3, it depends a lot on how it actually works, though. You can't tell from the rules decks, like, is this going to randomly adapt them? Are you going to get to choose once for each of them? Do you choose once and they all get it? But either way, it makes a big difference. But he's probably not bad. Certainly a decent arena pick. Spike Ridge Seed. This thing is pretty fun. Okay, it is expensive. It is 6 mana to give a minion +2/+6. But it's +2/+6 and taunt. So that's tough. And when your minion dies, it gives you a Stegodon, which is a 2/6 taunt. So that is a lot of value that you're getting out of this card. And hell, if you played it on a Primal Fin Champion, you would then get it back. So the amount of card advantage you would get out of this thing would be ludicrous. So I think that's strong. It's going to see a lot of play. I don't know if that means that people are actually going to play this quest, but it's there. Sunkeeper Tarim's their legendary. He's at 3/7 for 6. 3/7 taunt for 6. Battlecry, set all other minions, friend or enemy, set all of them to 3/3. Yep, you just turn them all 3/3. And he's a 3/7. He whoops ass on 3/3s, as it turns out. Who knew? So he's an interesting guy. That's really strong. I don't know about making a deck around that, or like, it is a very weird thing to decide what exactly you would plan to do with it, but it's effective when it hits the table. Vine Cleaver is weird. It's a 4/3 weapon for 7. You get a fair amount of uses. Every time your hero attacks, it summons 2 1/1 Silverhand recruits. So you can get tons of Silverhand guys, but it's been compared to the Piranha Launcher, and the Piranha Launcher is cheaper. It doesn't make as many guys, but by the time you can afford 7 mana, those 1/1s may not be doing as much as you'd like them to do. Like, I feel like this thing, it's powerful, but it's expensive enough. I don't think a lot of people are going to use it outside of the arena. Dino Size. It's hard to argue with Dino Size. It is 8 mana. It doesn't give a minion plus anything. It just sets the minion's attack and health to 10. So if you have a minion has good abilities, then that can go really crazy. And of course, you can play this on a minion that is able to attack this turn. So first off, if you have a Silverhand recruit that you made last turn that didn't die, Dino Size, he's now a 10/10 that can attack right away. But you have to think how this interacts with Adapt and all the Adapt cards in the set, and including their spell Adapt, right? Or Adaptation, sorry. This just changes the minion's attack and health. If you've adapted that minion to be untargetable Wind Fury Taunt, or similar types of crazy things, those would all still be there. So you could be sitting there and you have some, like, you have an untargetable, like, something Wind Fury that's gotten beaten down. Now it's like a 2/1 or whatever. Boom! Hit them for 20 plus its attack twice. Game over. Like, I think Dino Size is interesting and cool. Although I still don't see that quest going very far. Like, it's way too expensive to help with the quest very much. So next up we've got Priest. We're going to do Priest and Rogue, and then we're going to cut so I can do because the neutral minions take up a lot usually. Priest quest, Awaken the Makers. Your quest is to summon 7 Death Rattle minions. So I like that one because it does affect how you're constructing your deck, but you're probably still just filling your deck with good things. You're just really not being forced to do anything really out of the ordinary or suboptimal, other than slightly lowering your standards on what kind of Death Rattle minions you would play with. The reward is Amara, Warden of Hope, who is an 8/8 for 5, like those other ones, but her battle cry is just, well, her battle cry is, oh sorry, I forgot she's taunt. She's an 8/8 taunt for 5, battle cry, set your hero's health to 40. She just changed your current and maximum health to 40. So, if you have crazy healing abilities in your deck, you can keep healing yourself up to 40 as far as I can tell. But also, if you were at 10, 15, 2 health, when you play her, of course you get her from the reward. I don't think you have to play her right away. I'm pretty sure you have to spend the 5 mana to actually play her. Set your hero's health to 40. The amount of control comeback brutality of that, like, I'm just going to go out on a limb. This quest will be one of the popular ones. Okay, you have Binding Heal, which is interesting because it's a way more powerful flash heal, except that unlike flash heal, you can't turn it into damage if you have a healing reverser. If you have something that turns healing into damage, well, you can turn it. It'll still turn into damage, but on you and a friendly minion. Unlike flash heal, you can't use it to do 5 damage to your opponent. But, other than the offensive use, Binding Heal is pretty goddamn strong heal, because it's 5 health to a minion and 5 health to your hero. I'm not 100% sure if you have to have a minion to play this. If you have to have a damaged minion to play this, then it's kind of weaker. If you don't, if you can play this with no minions out and just gain 5 health, then this thing is super, super strong. It is very good for helping you stay alive, and if you are healing a minion and also gaining 5 health, that is a very good counter to aggression. Crystalline Oracle. I'm overemphasizing how strong it is. It's pretty damn strong for a 1-mana spell. Put it that way. Crystalline Oracle is a 1/1 elemental for 1 to help out with your elemental-based plans. And Death Rattle, copy a card from your deck and add it to your hand. So it's going to Thought Steal for 1 when it dies. That's a pretty kick-ass, and of course it's a cheap Death Rattle minion to help out with your Awaken the Maker's plan. So it helps with the quest and with elemental things. The Radiant Elemental, holy crap, solid 2-drop here. 2/3 for 2, we always like those. Elemental, a useful type in this set. And it just makes your spells cost 1 less. Just pay less for spells. People are going to want to kill him, because that is super effective. So, he's going to be very popular. Shadow Visions, also going to be... This card is nuts. Oh, I thought the Mage one was crazy, but 2 mana, discover a copy of a spell in your deck. So, here's a scenario. First off, you're a priest. You have good spells in your deck. So you get to discover one of those. It's not a random priest spell. It's a priest spell that you have chosen that was good enough for you to put into your deck. So already it's like narrowing it down. You will only have good spells to choose from, and you still get to choose from 3. But here's a scenario. What if the only spells in your deck are Shadow Visions and 2 other things? I don't know if the Shadow Visions can Shadow Vision itself. I don't know if it has to be a spell that is currently left in your deck, or if it's spells that are in your deck, including the one that you cast it from, like including stuff in your hand and play and already played. But in any case, if you only had 2 different spells in your deck, other than Shadow Visions, no matter how it works, you are guaranteed to get a copy of one of those spells, right? Or, worst case, it randomly gives you multiple copies where they can be the same, which I haven't seen any other Discover thing do that ever. But even if that was the case, you still have an incredibly good chance to get one of those cards. So you could make combo decks that really require a specific card, and, oh, look at that! It gave me that specific card. I really wonder if that affects the quest. I wonder if you can get quests from those things, because that would be odd. But in any case, this is super powerful. It's going to be used for craziness of combos. Curious Glimmerroot is a 3/3 for 3, so his ability better be damn good. Battlecry, look at 3 cards. Guess which... Okay, this is messed up. So it's going to give you 3 cards that can be neutral cards or cards from your opponent's class. Cards that could conceivably be in your opponent's deck. And it's like, guess which one of these, like one of the 3 cards, is actually from your opponent's deck, and 2 of them are not. If you guess the right one, you get a copy of it. So, worst case, it's a 1 in 3 chance to give you an extra card, which I wouldn't be so happy with. But it's better than that, because first off, if you have any clue what's going on, that you should, I would guess that even if you aren't super up on the meta and playing ranked or whatever, even if what's in your opponent's deck is very unknown in general, I would still guess that you'd be up to, say, a 50-50 chance to get a card. But also, it's telling you to some degree, it's giving you information about what is in your opponent's deck. So there's some value there. I don't know if it's really that great, but it's interesting. Mirage Caller, 2/3 for 3, Battle Cry, choose a friendly minion, summon a 1/1 copy of it. I like this better than the Mage thing that just flat out copies a minion, because this is slightly cheaper. You get a 2/3, that's crappy stats for 3. You also get a 1/1. You're only getting a 1/1 copy of the minion, but the thing that I thought the Mage one was most likely to be useful for is if you had some minion with a crazy ability that you wanted another copy of, like a Salamander. I'm pretty sure Salamanders are rotating out, probably, but you know what I mean. So being able to copy a 1/1 minion's crazy ability, onto a 1/1 is pretty strong, and you can use this guy for that. So he's going to be interesting. I don't know if that's a good enough power in general that you would play him a lot, but he's cool anyway. Totally Shellraiser, 2/6 taunt for 4, so that's a solid taunt. He's tough, like he's just so much better. The 1/7 taunt guy for 4 is such crap. This 2/6 taunt for 4 is a really nice sweet spot for early game taunt, because 2 damage will still kill a lot of weenies or badly hurt. Like that's half of the health for a 4 hit point minion, so it starts being a relevant amount of damage. And 6 health will keep it alive to taunt effectively. And in this guy's case, his death rattle gives a friendly minion +1/+1. So it's like, here, have even more stats. Is it the most amazing death rattle ever? No. But this guy seems like a very solid defensive card, and also helps you get your crazy Amara quest. Lyra the Sun Shard, your legendary, is a 3/5 elemental for 5. Whenever you cast a spell, add a random priest spell to your hand. Priest spells are pretty good. So now it's like whenever you cast a spell, you get a spell. But then you cast a spell that you got from the spell, and then you get a spell that you got from the spell that you got from the spell. It's, yeah, you when this guy comes down, you got to kill him, because your opponent's going to keep casting stuff. Some of those spells might be garbage, but they're going to get a lot of like power out of that. Even if you just play him, and then you flash heal, or like the new flash heal thing, you play him, and then you binding heal, and then you shadow visions, and you've just gotten so many like cards out of cards. It's craziness. Free from Amber. This is a really strange card to me. So it's 8 mana to discover a minion that costs 8 or more. So most discover cards are usually on the cheaper side, right? Most of them, they let you discover something. So, and that's why discover is good so often, is because often you have a cheap card, you discover, and then you can choose, do I take something, hopefully you get a chance to take something cheap that you can use right away, or you have the choice, a lot of the time, to take something huge and fat to save your ass later on. This removes a lot of that flexibility. This is a very like expensive minion. It does summon it right away. It can't undersell that component. Like, you're paying 8 mana to discover a minion that costs 8 or more, and immediately summon it. Now, summon means I don't think you get their battle cry, so that's a little messed up. But that also could save you from drawbacks. So you could cast this and get old style Deathwing, just 12/12 with no like discard or any of that stuff. So that works, for better or for worse. If you wanted Deathwing to kill everything, well, he won't. But it's interesting because, oh man, like it's good that this is on the list of things that you can be discovering out of, like, that you can be getting for free out of that guy, or discovering from your deck maybe, or yeah, it's really like you can get a powerful minion from this. It does give you a choice, and it does mean that at turn 8 you could play something that costs 9 or 10 mana, but I don't know if this is getting you far enough ahead, because again, you were going to get to there in 1 or 2 turns anyway, and you could have had like a specific 8-cost minion that is good for your cause. So I really don't know. I'm sure it'll do interesting things in the future. Okay, last class before we break up the video. We have Rogue. Hallucination. It's just like 1 minute, discover a card from your opponent's class. If it's too hard to get cards from your opponent's class, this will just give you a card from your opponent's class, not from their deck. It's not giving you any information. But 1 mana, discover a card. That's pretty good. Okay, the Caverns Below is their rogue quest. The quest is to play 4 minions with the same name. And that's play. Play 4 minions means they actually have to have been cards in your hand. On the other hand, they could have been those 1/2 elemental cards that a lot of things give you in your hand. So that's probably the most common way to do this. Because it's play, it's not going to work with Jade, which is kind of messed up. Although if you had Jade guys and then you were like bouncing the Jade guys to your hand with Brewmasters, that'd be a really weird, messed up way to do this. It doesn't make much sense. But you do all that, and then you're going to get the Crystal Core. The Crystal Core, that's the wrong picture. The Crystal Core is for the rest of the game, your minions are 5/5. It's just a 5 mana spell. For the rest of the game, all your minions are 5/5. So, theoretically, if your deck is full of cheap minions that you're trying to get 4 copies of, like, I don't know, those 1/2 elemental cards that things add to your hand that cost 1 mana, now those would be 5/5 elementals for 1 mana. That's pretty interesting and strong. It is a weird condition to try and get. You could also try and get to that by, like, the thing that shuffles, that copies guys, like Press Gang or whatever it is, that shuffles 3 copies of a guy in your deck. But it's mostly going to be done by those 1/1 things or a ridiculous amount of bouncing. It's very strange, but making all your minions 5/5, that means your deck can be very, very rushy. But yeah, it would allow your rush deck to suddenly be very dangerous later in the game. So it's interesting. We have Biteweed. Yeah, well, Biteweed. It's a 1/1 for 2 combo, gain +1/+1 for each other card you played this turn. So it's a non-legendary, weak version of Van Cleef, or whatever his name is. +1/+1 for each other card you played this turn. Yeah, it does seem weaker than both, like, what's his name, both Van Cleef, and it seems weaker than the Adventurer, honestly. Like, this costs less mana, but he also starts one smaller, so yeah, this is just, I don't think that's very exciting. Razor Petal Lasher is a 2/2 for 2 battle cry. Add a Razor Petal to your hand that deals 1 damage. I'm pretty sure Razor Petal is just 1 mana, deal 1 damage. So you're like, that's kind of annoying that I pay 2 mana for my 2/2, and then I have to pay another 1 mana to do 1 damage. And you're like, wait, that's a crappy Dwarven Rifleman. Not quite, because remember, you're a rogue. 1-cost spells help you trigger combos, so this is actually, for a rogue, much better than the Shitty Rifleman. Also, it's flexible, right, because you could save them up, unlike Shitty Rifleman. You could play him for 2 mana, and then at a later time, when it's convenient, you could play that spell for 1 damage. Also, unlike the Rifleman, this is affected by spell damage. If you have spell damage stuff, those petals could be doing more. You could stack up a lot of petal damage, and it's kind of cool. Razor Petal Volley. It's 2 mana, add 2 Razor Petals to your hand to deal 1 damage. Again, you're paying 4 mana to do 2 damage, split however you want. So you have to be doing something else to make this actually good. But if you have things that trigger off every spell you cast, like if you had an Auctioneer, you'd get a spell trigger for casting the Razor Petal Volley, and then 2 more spell triggers for casting the petals itself. So this 1 card would let you cast 3 spells, if that's your objective. Or you can just use them to trigger combos, or you can get spell damage, so it's interesting. This one, though, is definitely not something you would main deck very often, I don't think. Like, even in the arena, I don't know if you'd pick that, unless you had reason to believe you'd have good combo stuff to use it with. Envenom Weapon. Just 3 mana, give your weapon poisonous. Which is kind of interesting, because that means that if you just made a new, fresh dagger with your hero power, you pay 3 mana, and now your dagger does infinite damage to minions. You stab a minion for 1, it dies. Stab another minion for 1, it dies. So this would let you kill 2 things if you had a weapon with a lot of uses, or a way to add uses to your weapon. then you could maybe kill even more minions out of it. Although, I mean, you're still taking damage for this. So it's interesting, but I don't know if it's the super amazing thing. Mimic Pod. It's 3 mana, draw a card, then add a copy of it to your hand. So this seems like a much more manageable version of Thistletea, right? Thistletea was spending 6 mana to draw 1 card and get 2 copies. So you're spending 6 mana to get 3 cards, which are all the same, no flexibility. This is 3 mana to get 2 cards, so it's the same as Arcane Intellect. It happens that you're only drawing 1 card for fatigue purposes, and they're both copies of the same card, so you don't get that flexibility of drawing more cards. But this seems pretty solid, whereas Thistletea was just too expensive, and like, you either want Sprint or you want this. I don't think you ever actually want Thistletea. Obsidian Shard. It's a 3/3 weapon for 4. It costs 1 less for each card you've played from another class. I mean, that is kind of a rogue thing now, to play cards from other classes and get those cards stolen from other classes, but that just doesn't seem like the greatest weapon, considering that your class that can make weapons. I don't know. Seems not as good. Shirazin, Corpse Flower. So this guy is really weird. He's a 5/3 for 4, which is like, okay, fine. He's fragile, but can do damage. His Death Rattle, when he dies and his Death Rattle triggers, the minion card is replaced by one of those indestructible things that takes up a minion slot. If you've seen some of the Tavern Brawls have, like, there was that one from Karazhan with the portal thing that sits in the middle of your playfield. It takes up a minion slot, but it is not a minion. It's indestructible. It doesn't attack. It has no stats. It just sits there. So he turns into one of those, and then if you play 4 cards in a single turn, then that thing turns back into the Corpse Flower. I assume it doesn't have Summoning Sickness. I assume it can attack right away because it was in play. If not, then he's kind of crap. Even if he is, playing 4 cards in a turn is a lot. But between the elemental things and the Razor Petal volleys, it might not be as hard as it seems. Then we have the Vile Spine Slayer, which is 3/4 for 5 with combo Destroy a Minion. So, if you had one of those 1/2 elemental cards for 1, or if you had one of those petals, you could spend 6 mana to assassinate something and get a 3/4, and whatever your other spell did. I think these guys are solid. I don't know if you just generically would want to be replacing Assassinate with these, because it does require more to make it work. But it does seem pretty good. Certainly it's an amazing arena card. I get to assassinate somebody, and I still get a minion? Awesome. We'll get to the rest of the cards next time.
If you found that useful or entertaining, or if you enjoy cookies, hit the like button. And don't forget to subscribe to Demonet Games for more Hearthstone Arena and other gaming videos.